Hi everyone. Today my guest is Jeff Hardee. Jeff is a researcher and scholar who is pursuing currently a doctorate in consciousness studies and science. He studies all sorts of topics relating to mysticism and religious movements, how religious currents are born and how they evolve. Also, Qigong related a subject and all kinds of cool stuff. I wish I did my PhD in. Hi, Jeff.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Really, really fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So, um, Jeff, let's start from what brought you to studying all these incredibly fascinating topics?
Yeah, that's the story, right? Everybody has their origin story.
Yeah.
Mine is probably very similar to many people. Um, I can gloss over some things, and then if you want me to go more in depth, we can go in depth. But uh, I've always been interested in human abilities and being able to go past those abilities and stories about things like healings or martial art, abilities or UFOs and things like that as a kid. And I chanced upon as a high schooler the great encyclopedia Man, Myth, and Magic. It was an
Wow.
awesome set to be in a high school and just going through all these different, paranormal subjects and learning about some of the history and things like that. And I thought, man, that'd be awesome to study, if possible, or at least to on the side do some kind of, investigations with, or at least meet people who are involved in those things. And
Mm-hmm.
that interest sort of came from, the fact that I moved around as a kid and got exposure to international cultures and different ways of belief and practices and things like that. So after a long, fun journey of playing around with lots of different majors in college, I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in religious studies, and my focus was on new religious movements and mysticism. And I made it a
Mm-hmm.
practice. This was at most of my BA was at University of Arizona in Tucson, and I finished it in Tempe at Arizona State University. So Tucson is very rich in lots of different religious cultures. And so I made it a practice to go as a religious studies student. I wanted to go and see what do people practice, and talk to people and engage in their practices. So I would be, one day I would be with a Wiccan group, or another day I would be with an Ekankar group, or another day I would be dancing, the kirtan. I think that, some people can approach religious studies intellectually and just say, here's the list of beliefs, let's be comparative or not comparative, or let's dig into it. I'm all about, basically being in that moment and experiencing it with folks. So it's a lot more of a self engagement kind of thing. It's the anthropological approach of phenomenology, where you want to be part of that lived experience. So that does, and that was we had talked a little bit before in the ATS interview I did. It does actually change your viewpoint a little bit as in terms of pure scholarship. You're you're not just the ivory tower person just looking and being able to do the pure analysis, mental analysis of the subject you're looking at. you,
Mm-hmm.
you're you're losing some of that objectivity in a way, and you're engaging in it, which is fine with me because I think we need all people that are working the spectrum of studying, lived experience, those who are going to participate and those who are going to be more, intellectual and going to be more, um, looking at it from afar. So I've always approached these subjects phenomenologically. So
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, grad school did not work out. My professors at the time thought that new religious movements was too new of a subject. I wanted to focus on neo-paganism at the time, and especially when I mentioned the word phenomenology, I was essentially told, you will never be a graduate student here. So, okay, that threw a loop for me, and I ended up having an IT career and being in computers. But I
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to get back into the academics and have always had my own, practices that I would do. So I found this program. Ubiquity University had this program in the School of Science and Consciousness in extraterrestrial studies. But what it does is it allows me to, as just like religious studies is very broad and you get to be very, very multidisciplinary, extraterrestrial studies allows you to be very multidisciplinary, because what's the bigger question you can have is, how do we change as a species, or how do we relate to ourselves when you introduce an other, right? Another conscious race from another planet or dimension or whatever, that allows us to
Hmm.
really engage in our humanness a lot better, uh, and ask all those questions again. Who are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? All those kind of things. So um, I also wanted to jump into the program because I started doing this Nei Gong training on my own. I've been in martial arts before, and yoga and whatnot. So I was starting to do this Nei Gong, and this was a good excuse to keep doing it and to do it formally, as part of a dissertation. So I started doing what I call participant observation of 3 different Nei Gong groups, and I'm basically doing what I can for them, uh, uh, in the academic sense, and also as a practitioner, doing what they say you should do to follow their program, and then writing up my understanding of what I'm experiencing, and interviewing people, and also trying to bring in instrumentation to study what this whole thing about chi is, and this whole alchemy process that they claim to happen inside your body. So and then, as part of some other interviews I've talked about, one of the questions in my program, since it's about ETs, is, how does this relate to ETs? Well, if you look at the literature of the Nei Gong traditions, they say at the upper levels, when you are training, you will naturally start having more spiritual experiences. This, what they call the Shen powers that you can develop, and that includes communication with things like nature spirits, gods and goddesses, with non-human intelligences, with ghosts, with ancestors. And so my question is, well, if that's the case, if you're able to have this kind of communication, you develop this ability in yourself to be able to have that communication, could you use that to communicate
Hmm.
with NHIs, intelligent, conscious beings from other planets or dimensions that are visiting Earth or moving in without asking? And can we have that communication, and then therefore start having a little more one-on-one dialogue with these beings if they're here, uh, instead of waiting for things like disclosure to happen from the world's governments. So
Right.
that's kind of a short version.
Oh, wow. And many avenues to go into. So,
Right.
um, but I am curious if we can rewind a little bit as to like,
Mhm.
how did you make the jump from religious studies, albeit new religions, to studying the extraterrestrial um things,
Yeah.
but also qigong? Like brought what brought you to qigong?
Yeah.
How and why did you start practicing it?
So I'll answer the first one first. So
Mm-hmm.
the imagine uh, the big D, the big disclosure. We have beings that unveil their ships that are sitting in our atmosphere, and they get onto our airwaves, the television or internets or whatever, and show themselves openly, and they don't look human. And they say, we're here. Our culture has lived thousands of years more than yours. We're either visiting, or we're moving in, or we're just saying, hello, or whatever. And we have things to show you, or we want you to do certain things for us, or let's have some kind of an arrangement. We have our own history, our own science. What do you think that's going to do to the world's religions, those that have not prepared for this eventuality? It's
Mm-hmm.
going to throw a lot of those religions into chaos. And in that field of chaos is actually going to be a environment ripe for new religions. We've already seen that, in the 60s and 70s, where you have these the rise of the interest in UFOs and extraterrestrials, and those who are saying that they're in direct contact with those, telepathically, extraterrestrials, and they
Mm-hmm.
build groups around themselves, and then that eventually forms into religions, and they have their own theology and things like that. So that it's going to be an environment where new religions will start popping up, but then also it's going to be a crisis point for major world religions in asking, uh, how do we handle this? Because this is something we didn't account for. And we thought that we had the message. Every single major world religion claims that they have the message and the full truth, and or we have a book, or we have a prophet or prophetess who has told us everything there is to know. Um, how do we handle that? Well, they're going to really start struggling. And I think we need people who study religions and study how religions form, and how, they move from one culture to another, to be able to help humanity navigate that, or at least to be able
Mm-hmm.
to, I mean, if anything, comment on it. But also, this is this little side thought is, um, the serious struggles that I think are going to happen with fundamentalist type religions or philosophies. I think all fundamentalism uh, has made a stance, a stake in the sand that says this is the truth for us, and we go no further, and we're going to focus on this truth and just rally around this truth and just work on that. Well, when you have another culture, spacefaring culture, that is interacting with us, that's totally going to cause that to be thrown into question. And I think the fundamentalist groups, whether it's religious or political or philosophical, are going to have the hardest time for it, and will probably be the ones who react the most violently around
Mm-hmm.
this new way of being. So I think we need people who can help translate and can prepare the open space, dialogue that we all have for what I think, based on the evidence that I've seen so far, is the eventuality that we are not alone. We are not the only intelligent species in the universe, that there are others that have older cultures than ours, and that they are visiting. So I think it's something that that change is going to have to be navigated through, with those cultures. So that's where some of the religious studies comes in. It's interesting. I'm interested in cultures. I'm interested in, how you move from, let's say you invent a new technology, how it moves from the place it was invented all the way through the different, backdrops of the world, and how different, societies integrate or don't integrate that. I've always been interested in martial arts as a kid, and I practice different styles of martial arts, and in those they do talk about, not just the physical movements that you're doing, but things that you can do to enhance yourself through your focus, through what they talk about in terms of energy, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do things like jump really high, or do complicated moves very very quickly, or to in one of the styles that I studied called Hwarangdo, it's a Korean style. They would talk about things that monks could do to sustain really cold temperatures, or to even decrease their weight, a type of levitation, so that they could be able to do running, jump, spinning kicks in order to kick horsemen off of horses, in battle, or to be able to withstand being pierced in their skin, because they're able to stop the blood flow, to those places. So that's the beginnings of the idea of chi being interesting. Combine that with some yoga. I took yoga for a while, and I became a certified yoga instructor. That idea of prana, and then of course with meditation, and the other things that you can get into involved with that naturally leads to qigong practices, because it's all about manipulating and moving that qi. um, Although the sort of deeper levels of meditation and martial arts will possibly in the West naturally get you into the stories of John Chang, that individual who sort of was relayed to the world by the Blair brothers in their the story that they did, where they did the entire Ring of Fire, an Indonesian Odyssey, in 1988. They released that, and one of the shocking things that they showed was this healer, who went by the name of John. He was called Dynamo Jack as well, and he was able to emit some kind of electricity outside of his body, uh, and he was talking to them about what it is. It requires meditation every day, that he has both yin and yang energy that he's working with. And then he decided to do a quick demo, and they filmed it, where he set a piece of paper, newspaper, on fire, simply using his chi being emitted out of his hand. And that was replayed over and over again for people on this documentary series. That for many people, especially martial artists and whatnot, who saw that, are like, that's confirmation of all those myths that we heard about, of people in kung fu and whatnot flying through the air and doing, these great powers. Here's somebody in Indonesia who's actually doing that. I want to learn
Mm-hmm.
that, right? I mean, a lot of people get interested in that. So I saw that as well. Being younger, that was just after I, graduated from high school. It's easy to fall into that natural pathway where eventually you start hearing about Nei Gong and Nei Gong. And I was able to, get in contact after, reading from the people who have taught from after learning a little bit with John Chang, some Westerners who had published a few books. Kostos Danaos, he wrote The Magus of Java, and then you've got Jim McMillan. He wrote a book as well. Um, I eventually, you go through on forums, and there's this well-known, very contentious forum called the Tao Bums, where people like to write about all the practices that they're doing, and argue a lot with each other about who's doing authentic practices and who are not. But
Mm-hmm.
from there, there was an announcement about a teacher, who was going to be offering some, medical seminars, medical retreats with an authentic Nei Gong master. And that eventually led to an interview with Trevor Seven, if you've ever heard of him. He's a well-known YouTuber, has the longest running telekinesis channel on YouTube. He's been doing it for like 14 years or so. And he interviewed who's someone who's my teacher, Rudy from Authentic Nei Gong, who he's a TCM doctor. He went to China. He studied under several individuals for being a TCM doctor, but also studying this Qi. And he eventually met authentic masters and was able to go through the process himself, and then is now teaching it as a Westerner. And so, because of Trevor Seven's interview, I heard about Rudy, and I contacted him, and I started his program in, I think it was officially, I think I contacted him in December of 2022, and I started his first seminar in like February of 2023. So I've been working with him throughout this time. In fact, this morning we just had one of our monthly, online get-togethers that we do as a school.
Mm-hmm.
But then I've also, heard about some other groups, and because I started this dissertation, I thought it would be prudent for me to compare and work with some other groups. So I've also been working with this other group called Nei Qigong Fu, which is run by a couple people. There is Cosentino Valente is the main teacher. He's from Italy, and his student Joshi Andrea Castro Giovanni Ayan.
Yeah.
He has an online presence, and he's teaching Nei Gong Fu online for people like me who can't go to Italy on a regular basis. And what's interesting is that one of the main teachers for both Master Costantino and then Sifu Rudy, it's the same teacher. It's Master Zhou Gansheng, who's a Taoist priest from China. And So I decided to do some of their training as well. And at the same time, I've heard about Demo Mitchell, who's been around for quite some time and teaching Nei
Mm-hmm.
Gong and Qigong and Bagua and lots of other things. He's got the most comprehensive program. And so I started going through the program, and it just so happens they started this foundations program last year for people to sort of get the real straight foundations for the Nei Gong process that he teaches. So I jumped into that, and we're about to meet him in June for a 10-day retreat. But we go every couple months to do a couple days, and we have all this stuff online. So I now have a cornucopia of information that I can pair with. I'm stopping at 3 groups. There's only so much I can actually do, so many hours per day, because you have to do quite a lot of work per day to work on this. But that's how I really went through this meandering path, from early interest, martial arts, yoga, all the way down through meditation, some other things, until I got to this point where I'm combining all my interests together.
I was telling you before we started that I actually watched one of the conversations you had on the ATS
Yeah.
channel, and I was telling you that the reason why I loved it so much is because you guys were talking about Qigong, you were talking about a particular teacher, and I was telling you how much I loved like listening to you talk because you spoke of so many things that I'm such a fan of, whatever the area, but especially within, anything to do with spirituality, where you mentioned joining the community with this particular teacher. And there was the first thing that I loved so much was when you talked about studying with other teachers was completely encouraged. And then to come back and share what you've learned and compare notes. And I thought that in of itself was so refreshing because I see from the conversations I've had with people who were part of, communities around spiritual awakening or any particular type of tradition, not all of them, of course, but there was a lot of discouragement, actually, active
Right.
discouragement from exploring other traditions, from exploring other teachers, from exploring even different practices, models, approaches, and so on. And so, for me, when I hear something like this, to me, it's a red flag straight away, and I'd be out like as soon as I heard such thing. But you also talked about, because I can see just like, I can't help but like draw the parallels between even things like Kundalini, how much there can be this almost like performative Kundalini just to show off, what that does, and a whole identity being wrapped around this of, sort of that says, look how special I am because like I can do
Right.
this stuff, and I could see very much with Qigong that's probably possible as well. And there's a potential for that where the core of what it is about is kind of missed completely, in the name of, some amazing videos that like get lots of likes and, that sort of thing. Um, so part of me also wonders, if some of the because we talked about also the exclusivity around these things and almost like these topics being sort of taboo, and part of me like kind of wants to play devil's advocate because on the one hand I find that any kind of inclusivity or kind of hierarchy that talks about some kind of spiritual superiority, no matter what stage you're at in a journey, as really off-putting straight away. um
Yeah.
but there's part of me that wonders, and I wonder what you have to say about that. That part of me wonders whether this exclusivity is also not well intended, in that when you see the potential of, first of all, certain risks related to that, to dealing with those practices, and especially this energy, and how it can do a lot of good, but also a lot of real damage. And that includes I don't know about Qigong, but I know that includes Kundalini. Part of me wonders, isn't it better that it stays slightly a bit more exclusive or taboo, so that there is some kind of making sure that it ends up with the right people, so to speak, that
Yeah,
really respect that.
right. Yeah, that is extremely valid question, and it's a question that has been a part of the mysteries for humans who for millennia have been studying those. Um, I mean, we can go back to the Greek mystery traditions, wherein they have a ceremony that they bring people through. It's an initiation, and it's not meant to be spoken about. It's meant to be experienced. And from that, you can, make parallels with even, martial artists who have in an environment where they had to use their martial arts for their own protection, that some, certain lineages would have certain sets of techniques that were effective in battle, that they would keep close to the chest, right? Because that helped their
Mm-hmm.
clan or their community to survive under attack. Um, but then you delve into that question of safety, right? Because from my experience, what we're dealing with in Nei Gong is an actual technology that is part of our human makeup, that can be used for positive ends, can be used for healing, but it can be used to hurt people. And there's those mythological stories of these martial masters who are highly cultivated, and leveling forests, as they're fighting amongst each other, just with their hands and fists and things like that. Or, the whole story of, the one touch kill, of being able to kill somebody just by touching them in a certain way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there is a source of truth to that. So it's important to ask the question, I think, and it's important to know that there it's there is a reason for secrecy, but it's not necessarily the reason that is what supports hierarchy and control and things like that. Um, it would be the same. One reason for secrecy would be if there was a movie that you really wanted to see, just before you walked in the movie, would you want me to tell you what the ending was? No, you even if it was a historical movie and you knew what the ending should be, you still want to go through the experience. You want to get that lived emotional journey from beginning to end, and all the changes that the hero's journey that people go through. That's part of a transformation of ourselves, our psyches, right, and our beings, that help us to then move on to whatever our next stage of a practice is. That's the whole part of ceremonial magic, for example, deriving from the Greek mysteries, using things like the Kabbalah as a framework, and wherein they work, one sphere at a time, one sephira, one path at a time, as they go through initiations, and they have certain tasks to do at each stage, right? Homework and construction and physical things to do as well. Is
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily useful for somebody who's first starting, the very first path, leading to the bottom of the tree of life, the Malkut sphere, to know what you're going to do, near the end, the last three spheres. I mean, intellectually, you could be told, but you don't
Yeah.
have that lived experience. It's not going to bring you to the enlightenment that you're looking for. You won't unlock the abilities that you're trying to do. You literally have to walk the road one step at a time. You can't get in a car and be dropped off at the end and say you've walked it. Right? So
Yeah.
so there's reasons for that secrecy. Unfortunately, when the core part of the secret gets lost, the wisdom that's supposed to be gained there, the transformation that happens,
That's right.
then the
Yeah.
secrecy then gets misused. So what I think I'm seeing in these Nei Gong groups, but I'm specifically focusing on Western groups, is this cultural change. There was a reason for this knowledge to be held closely and secretly by various temples, both Buddhist and Taoist, and by other teachers, martial art teachers and whatnot. Um, there were good reasons. I mean, people died for this knowledge, and
Yeah.
or were misused and abused, right? So the question is that still needed today? I don't
Mm-hmm.
think so. I think that the world culture is starting to change, and the success that these Western groups are having in teaching other people is changing. But even in those groups, there is still a need for moving one stage at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can be told, I could describe for you, I'm not permitted to, but I could describe for you the exact uh, uh, movements that you should be doing at a higher level of the Nei Gong training. But if I told you
Mm-hmm.
what those movements were, they're not useful for you. You can't use them. The reason why is because you haven't spent the hours in the prior movements to be able to do the unlocking that is needed. So I, I guess one thing I need to emphasize in these discussions is that I'm talking about an actual physical change that your body must go through to unlock these abilities. You can't just read a book and have these abilities. It will not happen.
Or
That's
go on one
reality.
retreat and
On one retreat,
yeah,
yeah. It
yeah.
literally takes years to change your body, and my body is absolutely changing um, in several ways, subtle ways and bigger ways. Wherein, the first thing is you have to get your body to a certain level of health. You got to start
Mm-hmm.
eating well, you exercising well, because your internal organs have to be at a stage in order to even handle the energy that you're going to be accumulating. If you start accumulating and your organs can't handle it, you will burn your organs out. You will burn your meridians out, um, and you'll end up, you know, damaging yourself, maybe damaging other people, but clearly shortening your life. And that's not the whole point of what the Taoist process is. The Taoist process is to extend your life. So you just have to put in the work. Um, when you do put in the work, then it starts speeding up, right? And you start really
Mm-hmm.
feeling the differences, and there are actual physical signs. At least in my experience, it's not something that you did I have that is like sometimes if you go through, say, uh, this is something where I speak to another group of people about um, when you go through, say, like say an initiation in ceremonial magic. It's very symbolic. It's very linear figures, vibration of words, some actions and things like that. But it always seems like maybe there's a little bit missing. And yes, you can reach a certain level of enlightenment or understanding by going through that, but there's a part that's missing, and that part I think is this Taoist inner alchemy, which requires a lot more work in the base levels of physically changing your body so that you actually open up the channels, so that when you are doing your vibrations and your things that you're doing, setting in the quarters and things like that, that it won't just be a very light feeling of heat when you do that, that somebody on the other side will actually feel an electric charge coming off that you can measure, with a tri-field meter or something like that. That's a big difference. I mean, it's from something that has the framework of it and something that has the fullness of it. I've been doing this for pretty much every day, doing all the exercises for over 2 years now, and um, there are certain things that my body has changed to be able to do, and I know I have more change to do after that. So this process, I'm told by various teachers, usually takes around 5 years or so for you to start getting certain signs of doing the external energy emission. But then there's a whole lot of things that you do after that, if you want to continue working on it. So why is there secrecy? Well, not because the knowledge shouldn't be shared. It's just that it takes work to get there. You can't jump steps. You have to physically change. I can't start right now and run a full marathon at Olympic level. I can
Mm.
read everything I want about what Olympic level training is, but I'm not going to get there unless I actually put in the miles on, with my sneakers and sweat it out. So it's not because the knowledge shouldn't be shared. It's more like it is a personal journey that you have to transform yourself. You have to put in the work, and then as you transform yourself, you start hitting these stages, and then that unveils for you, and then you have more knowledge that comes out. That's a lived knowledge, Gnostic knowledge, right? It's knowledge that is fully embodied and it comes to you as is. It's not necessarily something you receive from somewhere else. It's something that you could say it bubbles up from within in some ways. And then that eventually you become your own guide as you go through the rest of the steps. And if you don't, you will hurt yourself, and or probably other people. So that's some of the reason for the secrecy, at
Yeah.
least the way I
Yeah.
understand it right now.
Yeah. I love how you talked about this, this whole role of the physical body in the process of awakening. I mean, it's one of the reasons why you and I are chatting today, by the way,
Yeah,
because, my journey, as many people will know who listen to this channel, unfolded outside of the path, particular tradition and practice. But life has been putting me through stages and paces,
mm-hmm.
and the whole journey had its own intelligence and stages. And, I can't even imagine dealing with the Kundalini energy, 10 years ago, and what that would do with the intensity that I experienced it a few years ago at the time. But what I'm trying to say is that, I was actually talking to someone about it today, that what life has shown me was that while definitely, the journey of awakening is very much about profound perceptual shifts in the way we, see and, experience reality. But it is like, I remember when I started learning and educating myself on the different traditions and different frames of reference sort of um later on. And again, not like I
Right.
studied everything, but like just the first kind of books and videos that I watched to educate myself, it seemed like body was just like excluded from the process, dismissed, downplayed, or even almost like shunned. Like it's like just
Yeah.
don't go there, as if this was some kind of a bad thing or whatever. And
Yeah.
I was already seeing that the later stages of my journey of awakening were both perceptual and very physical and visceral at the same time. And
Yeah.
actually, those later stages, ironically, brought me back in touch with my body. And I got to see actually how the very physical body was not only separate from this process, but it was quite literally a gateway, to awakening and to experiencing the reality with capital R, so to speak, and how much of it had to do with just constantly expanding my ability to be with really either powerful energetic sensations in the body or uncomfortable, painful emotions, which I ended up
Yeah.
seeing as purely physical sensations, but to be with them is a kind of a different story. So to me, the journey of awakening is very much an alchemical process that goes on in the body and transforms it. And I don't know this from books. I only know, which is why I can't really speak articulately about this because I'm no expert, on the knowledge about it, but life taught me that, like through,
Right.
direct experience. So can you talk a little bit more about that, and why is the physical body like sort of put aside or excluded,
Yeah, it's
when it
well,
comes to this process?
yeah, that's part of the history of religious studies in a way where the dominant monotheistic, paradigm tried to split out the spirit from the body, from the mind, and sort of consider the body to be lower or more dense, more earthly, tying you to the
Mm-hmm.
earth and therefore to the things of the earth which are furthest away from
Right.
God. And that therefore to be more spiritual, you need to deny the body. So do things like, have a cat o' nine tails and whip yourself, or, deprive yourself of food, or, sort of make the body realize that it is solely dependent on the spirit, and put all your efforts not only just on what you would consider to be your soul or your spirit, but put all your efforts on elsewhere, not on this planet
Yeah.
where we live. That the more important thing in those paradigms was not the life that we're living, but the life that we would have after. And
Right.
therefore, everything that you're working towards individually and as a society and whatnot should be for the afterlife. And the afterlife would be something that you would either get rewarded with or punished with, based on whatever the authority wants to say, you should be given. That has been a dominant theme for, quite a lot of cultures, but it keeps running into reality. The reality is there is a planet, there is a body, there is this earth, this lived experience that we have, this dimension, and it's not going away. I mean, we're going through this journey that we call life. All of us are, and uh, there many other religious traditions embrace this lived life and embrace this the activity of the body, and don't necessarily see matter as evil. And that's just part of the dynamics and the competition that you have for believers, across different world religions. So I think that's one of the aspects that I'm exploring as the new religious movement aspect of these Nei Gong groups, is that they are bringing practitioners back to the body, because a lot of the Westerners came from a dominant, religious tradition that said the separation between spirit and matter. But the Nei Gong is showing you, no, there is no separation. They both work intertwined, and you have to have your, as they say, the temple must be builded before the god can dwell therein, that kind of thing. Yeah, the temple's
Yeah.
the body, right? Your body has to be in the right place, not just as a vessel, um, but depending on how you want to view your hierarchy or your mythology, either a divine thing comes in and imbues you, or you transform into that thing which is divine, or you bring it out from yourself. Either way, whatever, there's still a body. And so all these practices are actually influencing that. And what's exciting, I think, and where I'm bringing in the instrumentation part of this is that is that our exploration of our bodies as humans is not done. Our evolution as human beings, physical human beings in this world of matter, is not complete. We are still evolving, and there are more abilities that we have that we've been part of our mythology for a while. The cities that have been part of lots of other religious traditions, in mystical traditions, we have those, and they're now with the modern technology and the ability for us to share things, with this kind of medium. We're seeing more
Mm-hmm.
and more that it's common for people to have things like telepathy, telekinesis, in
Yeah.
some cases, some levitations and things like that, healings, that we have some abilities that we can then work on and explore more about our humanity and have that kind of merging together of the spiritual and the material, all in one place, which is here now in our bodies as we are.
And it's kind of ironic, that on the one hand, you have these spiritual teachings that like teach about oneness and, unity and dissolving the sense of separation while perpetuating the sense of separation by
Right.
excluding the body, physical body, for example, from this process. But I forgot to ask a really important question, Jeff, which
Mm-hmm.
is which I should have probably asked much earlier on, but here we are. Um, what is chi?
Oh,
What are the types of chi? And how is it different from Kundalini?
yeah. Okay. That's a hard question. There's so many people that are asking that question. So I'm going to dance around the question by by
Okay.
defining by defining a part of it. Um, when I talk about chi in the context of the work that I'm doing for the Nei Gong groups,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about a refined chi. And Daniel Mitchell, actually, I was watching a video of his recently. He used a term which I think I'll start adopting too. It's training chi, the chi that you get when you do training. So so briefly, there in Taoism, in the Taoist Internal Alchemy system, there are, you could say, three main types of chi. There's Jing, which is the chi that you get um, because you're born, just the natural state of energy that you have as part of the birth process. And actually, I'm a big reader of Carlos Castaneda, and I think a lot of his ideas need to be reconsidered and brought back into the
Mm-hmm.
conversation for things. Whether he was, you know, inventing certain things or not, the fact is that he brought in a lot of elements and symbols um,
Correct.
and stories that could be utilized for the things that we're starting to experience in various
Absolutely.
other traditions. So one of the things Castaneda talks about, or Don Juan talks about, is when the parents are engaged in creating a new life, that the energy that they have and they contribute both equally to the creation of that new life is then therefore going to be the energetic store that that new being has for them to utilize throughout their lifetime. So basically, if the parents have boring sex, their kid is going to be very low energy. But if the parents have really great, strong sex, the kid's going to be a spitfire of energy, right? And the idea is that that's like your core. That's your core of energy that you actually have to start with, and that's the amount that you have to utilize until you die. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
think Jing is similar to that. That the idea of the baseline that you have is this Jing. However, in Taoist Internal Alchemy, they say that you can, through the ingestion of qi from other sources, breathing, food, those kind of things, even the media you consume, theoretically, that you can bring in qi from other sources, um, and uh, and refine that with your base level of qi that you have that you need for life. And as you refine it, you can not only restore the jing that you are leaching out as you age, you can restore the jing that you have at the base level, but then you can actually, through Taoist internal alchemy practices, start building up extra chi. And that's what is the refined chi or the training chi. That extra chi is what can be used then for these processes to assist in unlocking your meridians, to assist in making sure you maintain a really high level of health, to you begin to be able to move this chi around in your body, And eventually, if you continue in the training, you can emit the chi out of your body externally, out of your fingers or the palm of your hands. And you can use that for martial arts, for healing, and for spiritual development. This refined chi, you can continue the alchemical process, continue and continue, and keep building more and more and more, keep refining it more and more, and it becomes even more refined in what's called Shin. And that Shin chi, or that Shin state, is associated with your Danshin. So Jing, the base, is associated with the more so the lower Danshin, right? The place that's like 2 inches below your belly button and inside your body. And then the refined chi, starts getting refined there, and then that refined chi moves up to your the middle of your body, sort of where your sternum is, sort of there. Um, and then that can, as it keeps getting refined, can be moved up to the point between your eyebrows, but it's inside your head. It's not on the surface of your skin, it's inside your head. That's Shin. And from there, then you start getting a lot of these other abilities like contact with ancestors, being able to communicate with somebody across the other side of the planet, things like that. So when I'm talking about chi is a very broad term. If I recall correctly, the Chinese ideogram for chi is really just the heat wafting off of rice. But what I'm talking about is a substance. It feels like a physical substance that is part of your base energy, that then you're adding to and you're refining. It's some of the analogies are like, think of Jing as sort of like ice, and the refined chi is like water, and then the Shin is more like steam. That you're transforming these stages to then be able to use it. Now, the big question: how is that related to Kundalini?
Uh-huh.
Boy, I could be getting a lot of awards if I knew that answer. Um, what I think is we're just talking about different cultural systems describing this similar things. So Kundalini is more, Indian. Chi is more, Chinese and Asian in that way. Um, Basically, it's the TCM idea of the meridian channels. So you've got these channels throughout your body, right? And these meridian points that are used for acupuncture. And those channels will relate to your internal organs and can be used to help in your health. But there is also a central channel that runs through the center of your body. And that's where these danshins are aligned along the center of your body, from your lower abdomen to the middle of your chest to in between your eyes. There's other points, like there's points on your head. There's several other points. But um, in the yogic process of doing like pranayama breathing, you are attempting to unlock the energy that is at the base of your spine, which would be where your jing is, and you're also trying to move that energy through the central channel. And then the yogic process, there's actually three. There's the Ida, Pingala, and then Sushumna, right? So as that moves, then in the more Indian perspective of the chakras, as that energy moves, that prana moves through your central channel, or the Kundalini awakens, Kundalini serpent awakens, it starts interacting with your chakras, and then your chakras start unlocking in a way. And when it does so, it um, gives you a certain type of enlightenment, opens you up and whatnot. And eventually the idea is that it moves up and comes out of your crown and you get full enlightenment. In the Taoist Inner Alchemy, they don't just want to go up once. They want to go in a circuit around and around and keep that circuit going. So it's unlocking your spine, and then moving up your back, and then moving around your there's two channels, one in the back and one in the front, and then move it down, and then they meet at your perineum, and they go back around again, and you do that as an exercise to improve the health. So I think they're very related, and I think they're just different
Hmm.
practices for how to move the energy, and different traditions, different cautions, different purposes for doing so. But I can say, I'll repeat the one thing I described in the ATS interview is um, I actually felt the Kundalini move um, as something that just occurred as part of this, refinement of the chi that I was doing, where I felt a cold kind of mass emit out of the base of my spine, um, which I now know is the Ming Men area of Taoist Internal Alchemy, and it emitted. It was colder than the rest of my body, so that's why I knew it was cold, and it basically was sort of began to move up my spine, but sort of like a snake. And I wasn't
Hmm.
intending for it to do that. It was just starting to move up my spine, but it was slow and it was cold. And I was thinking like, well, okay, what's this doing? And it took several days. I mean, I kept doing my exercises over and over again, and I knew it wasn't hurting. It wasn't feeling physical pain. It was just slowly moving. And each time I did my exercises, it would move a little bit more. And then eventually it got, up, started moving up towards where my brain was. And I thought, okay, if I have an aneurysm, then that's it. But I should just let it keep going. and it just did its own
In the
thing.
name,
And it
in the
just,
name of research.
I guess that's it, right? And it just kept moving, and it kept moving over my head, and it kept going until it actually stopped just underneath my nose. Now,
That's incredible.
why would it do that? Why would it stop there? And what's that following? Because I would think from the Indian system it should go, up and then it shoot out my, top of
Hmm.
my head. But it kept going, and the reason being is because of the practices I was following. One of the things that we do is we place our tongue on the roof of our mouths, and that tongue serves as a bridge. It's called the magpie bridge, and you could see it in the Neijing 2 diagram, where it actually connects the Du channel with the Ren channel, and it allows that movement then for that energy once it stops here, because that's where the meridian points stop. And then it makes that bridge and then starts going down your front until it reaches the perineum, and then it connects back with the Du, and then it starts moving. So eventually, in these practices, you'll start doing what's called the microcosmic orbit, and you'll keep moving it around as one stage of the things that you do. So um, there are
Yeah,
physical things that happen when you do that. We've talked about that. I've had these
yeah.
things called Zifa Gong happen to me,
Hmm.
where sitting in my meditation, I may suddenly because my mouth is my teeth are not clenched. My tongue is at the
Hmm.
roof of my mouth, and my teeth are open. But all of a sudden, sometimes my teeth will just go clack. I'm glad my tongue's not out, right? Or suddenly, like my arm will just throw out to the side. It's a very
Right.
small movement. It's not meant to be large or too indulged in. It's the way that Daniel Mitchell describes it. He has a great chapter in one of his books on Zifagong. It's basically your body is working out the energetic movements that are happening within it, and it's just sort of it's like a burp, basically. It's like a spiritual burp. It's just meant to just get the gas out, and then you just keep, digesting. So it's
Yeah.
fascinating, but I have witnessed it being much larger and much more of a bigger experience for some people, including, and he describes it in his books, including people doing mudras, or dancing, or doing a series of bows. Um,
Yeah.
that happened in a group exercise not too long ago, where there was an individual that just started doing some pretty violent bowing of his
Oh
forehead
my
to the
God.
ground. We were doing a standing posture, Wuji posture, for several hours, and in the middle of it, this individual just started like slamming his head on the ground. And the teacher, kind of rightly said, "Don't worry about it. Don't pay attention. Just work on your own thing. He's working out his own stuff." So, but everybody has that experience, on their own. Their body, their energetic body has to unlock in their own way. Just the one caution that I've heard that Dow Mitchell say is, it'll happen. It's like a burp or whatever. Just
Mm-hmm.
don't think that that is the end or that is the goal. Keep going. Keep do the thing that you're doing, and it'll should smooth out. It shouldn't be the end state. The end state is something else. It'll happen,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and then eventually it'll stop. So the Zifao Gong is described as just the things that happen that your body will do spontaneously because your body's energetic system is being activated when it wasn't activated before, and
Mm-hmm.
certain channels are being smoothed out. So you're just
Yeah,
working out and putting all systems online. Magical
makes
passes is
sense.
slightly different. Magical passes
Talk to me
are,
about that.
yeah, so that's coming from the castellated disciplines of dreaming and stalking, wherein as part of the warrior path of sorcery, wherein you're using your energetic being to activate, to use your awareness to activate different bands of your energetic being to interact with the world in a certain way at will, maybe go and explore other worlds, but also
Mm-hmm.
to get to the point where you can maintain your own awareness at the point of death and move on as an aware being out beyond death. In order to gain that power, you do things like dreaming. Dreaming is a type of conscious lucid dreaming, wherein you can interact with other beings or another dimension, you can call it, and
Mm-hmm.
learn these magical passes. You learn the magical passes as a knowledge that you take from dreaming. And when you do them, it'll actually boost your energetic being and allow you to get past obstacles or to grow energetically or confront adversaries or things like that. So the magical passes are actually, it's a knowledge that you get from another world, you could say, from the dreaming world,
Right.
and that you use as part of your equipment as a warrior to move forward for your goals. So it's slightly different, but it's similar in that it's your energetic body um, that you're working with. It's just in the
Yeah.
Castaneda sense, the magical passes are more like martial art forms, or portions of
Mm.
techniques from martial arts that then you can use to move forward. The Zifa Gong is just you're bringing your systems online, you're activating your meridians,
Yeah.
and then every now and then your body will burp, and then you'll be done. But magical passes are
Yeah.
more like a set of techniques that you can take with you. Before I forget, there's a whole video series I should send to you from a group called Tensegrity. They
Yeah.
created a DVD or two of movements that they claim that they've taken from their dreaming. And it looks like a whole, it looks kind of like its own form of Qigong, where it's these specific movements and it's meant to do certain things for your energetic body, exercise or enhancement or whatever. I'll send it to you.
Right.
Maybe if you tried some of those, let's see how you would react.
Oh wow, I will definitely watch it. I mean, the only dreaming bit is the one that I mentioned to you, that like people having dreams of what I am meant to do to them, and they have
Right.
the exact vision of like like how they're supposed to be, like what position they're in, which body part uh, needs to be addressed. Um,
Right.
like for my partner, it was a tummy. For the fascia practitioner that I work with, it was actually these two points here,
Mhm.
just the tear duct, and also here, you know. And he said that, and again, they come and like they tell me, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like, because literally there's no part of me that knows what to do. It's the intelligence of whatever it is that works through that knows what to do,
Yeah.
because I genuinely don't. And after this practitioner told me about these bits, and that's where I need to focus on. When I did, afterwards, he literally felt like his organs were um
Yeah.
reorganized. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
That's very much Castaneda, magical passes.
wow.
It's the in his philosophy, there every human being has a Nagual side and a tonal side. So
Oh my God. Yeah, sorry.
Our
Oh
Nagual
my
side is
God.
our side from the other, right? The side that allows us to connect with that unknowable. Our tonal side is our ego, right? Our little island of
Mm,
ego that is our
mm,
person. So it makes total sense from that philosophy that you, the person speaking to me right now as an ego, doesn't know what those things are, but your Nagual side does. So
yes.
when you're in that dreaming state or in that other state, it does, and you can take that knowledge and help your tonal side to do the task that the tonal has.
Yeah, and it's really incredible because it literally feels almost like the body remembers. It's like the
Yes.
body remembers something that it already knows, it has already learned, and maybe even done multiple times before,
Right.
and it's just sort of coming sort of back online. Really genuinely don't feel like I'm in control of that at all, or that I
Right.
am making it happen or anything like that.
Right.
So just by virtue of that, it is very humbling, you know?
Yeah.
And the very first time that I saw, there was a moment when the person at the receiving end of this was lying on the like massage bed in front of me, and I was sitting behind her. She had her eyes closed, and when the movement stopped, my hands came together almost like in like I don't know what that meant. I can only, it felt like thank her for being the person who was open to sort of receiving it. And as my
Yeah.
hands came together, her hands came together
Oh,
as
nice.
well at the same time. And
Mirroring.
this
Yeah.
was yeah, and it was the very first time that um I realized this is not just moving something for me, like I'm blocking things and clearing. This is now also doing something for another person. And I
Yeah.
literally just burst into tears because, I felt like I kind of found myself in a role that I didn't sort of sign up for, or like sort of
Mhm.
meaning, consciously and not necessarily even knowing what to do with it. But I remember that moment vividly as like extremely humbling in ways I can't,
It's a
you know.
fantastic experience. I think that it's natural for human beings to
Mm,
have this experience when they start exploring these things. I encourage people to explore them. And I also encourage at the same time for when people explore them not to be too quick to try to create explanations for what they are, because
wonderful.
too many of the people that I see go through this process, which is great. The exploration process of spirituality or even early initiations or whatnot is they have fantastic experiences, but then they want to try to cram that experience into a previously made construct of a belief system or something like that. This must be this, and I have to fit this thing into this thing I've previously believed or somebody's trying to force me to believe. And I say, we're not
Yes,
there yet. We're still learning, we're still evolving, we're still growing. Let's just experiment, let's share. And then we'll find out together what the ultimate meaning is sometime later, right? I mean, that's another thing Castaneda talks about is through Don Juan is there's the known, the unknown, and the unknowable. The known, we keep growing and we start carving away from the unknown, but there's still a part of the universe that is unknowable that we should accept. And it's a great, fantastic, wonderful mystery that we can interact with, but we'll just never be in the realm of the known. We will just interact with it in the realm of the unknowable. So There's no reason to create explanations for things yet. Just experience them and try to, make them beneficial for you in your life.
Yeah, this is such a wonderful message because I know like the intellect, the mind has such a tendency to just like fit something as soon as possible into some kind of definition or
Mhm.
conceptual box or anything like it, label it some way, interpret it and so on. And I think that, one of the kind of one of the most amazing outcomes of this whole journey that I've been on was just the freedom from the known and not having the need to do that. And
Yeah.
it's just, and that is actually, it it is such freedom to just explore for the hell of it, and to just without needing to arrive into ultimate even to any ultimate conclusion. That is not to say that we can't have any conclusions or interpretations,
Right.
but it's like the sort of emotional investment or like the kind of really strong attachment to those ideas is basically no longer there. So we can just be free to, explore and talk and whatever.
Yeah.
But Jeff, I also wanted to ask you, because I'm aware that we've been talking for an hour and a half, so I don't know how much time you've got left. Um, but I'm very curious to know how the practice of Qigong has impacted you, your life,
Yeah.
your across the board.
Yeah. It so I mentioned the fact that it has actually changed my body. That's
Hmm.
a fact. So well, I should preface the fact that I practiced martial arts before. I've done yoga before, some other energetic practices before. So I'm not new to it all. But formally doing the Taoist Internal Alchemy, under a teacher, and getting specific exercises to do every day. Um, the first thing that has changed for me is I used to have a lot of sinus headaches in the past, whether through stress or through sleep or those kind of things. Um, but pretty soon after getting into the Nei Gong practices, that eventually went away pretty quickly. I think a lot of it has had to do with diet, because in order to do these practices, you have to really have a cleaner diet and become much more aware about the food that you're bringing in. Everything you bring into your body, that's chi that you would be using in the alchemical process to refine. So, like for example, I did a little cheat last night, and I had a brownie. So we got like this
Okay.
free brownie from this store from these uh, getting these chicken strips, and they forgot half the order, and I went back, so they gave me a free brownie. And so I said, it's been a long time since I've had a brownie. Why don't I have one? Well, this morning, no, don't feel that great just by having one brownie because of all the
Wow.
chemicals that are in that food. But also the internal alchemy process has actually made me a lot more sensitive to dairy. So pretty
Wow.
soon after doing this process, of everyday meditation and whatnot, um, I just can't have dairy right now. I used to really like cheese. I was already not drinking milk, so I was more drinking like rice milk and almond milk.
Hmm.
I still do the almond milk, but I really now, when I go to restaurants, have to do, make sure that there's no dairy. It's not that uh, it lays me out or whatever. What it does is it creates a lot of phlegm. Like my body will react to dairy, and I immediately will get a lot of phlegm produced in my throat or a little bit in my sinuses.
Right.
And it used to not do that because I used to, eat pizza all the time and things like that and not have to have that. Well, if your body's system is used to having that kind of dampness, then you're less aware of it. But if you eliminate that from your diet or you start listening to your body more and you only ingest the things that actually feel like they are living, that have chi, that are actually good for where you're at in that stage of your life,
Hmm.
then you start becoming a lot more sensitive. to those things. So there's a lot of foods that I just don't eat anymore because I can recognize, at least for me, the way I say it to me is this food has no chi, so I shouldn't eat it. So it'd
Mm-hmm.
be like I used to drink a lot of soda, right? We all know soda's not great for the waistline, but with all the chemicals that are in the soda and the fact that it has a lot of fake sugars, um, I just can't have it. I'll start having a little bit of a headache just by having a couple sips of soda, which is my
Wow.
body telling me, "What are you doing? You just cleaned me up. Why are you starting to put poison back into me?" So one of the
Yeah.
things that's happened is, my migraines went away, but I'm much more sensitive to food and what is good food for me to eat. So I'm naturally eating a much cleaner diet. I'm not eating as much as well. I don't snack as much throughout the day. So my weight, is naturally kind of going down from that,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. Um, I have a ton more energy than I used to. Um, I naturally wake up like around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I've heard that people who do a lot of, meditation, they don't need as much sleep actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm 55, but I still have a lot of energy as if, as in my 20s. I'm still doing martial arts. I can still jog. Lots of physical things or mental, kind of focus things that are still there, still improving, that kind of stuff. Um, my other practices are still continue, like lucid dreaming. I
Mm-hmm.
actually started training for the Psy Games. The first time ever, as far as I know, this group of people have gotten together. Hakeem is the individual who brought it out. This August will be the first time that a series of games are done for psi abilities. So there's 5 categories. There's psychokinesis. There's being able to see into the future. There's being able to, wearing a blindfold and being able to identify colors or numbers or
Mm-hmm.
words. All those, the remote viewing, those kind of things. All those are categories that we get to do as a game, and it's meant to be fun and friendly and encouraging. And I thought, I don't know if I have any psi abilities or not. I'll just train for all 5, categories and just see how I do. And they were giving us these pre-testing things that we had to do. We had a 2-week period in which to do these tests. You had to do like 15 rounds of every test in order to make it statistically significant. And sure enough, in the 5 categories, I've ranked in the top 10 of all 5. So I
That's
should be able to compete.
incredible.
Yeah, so I think you could say that this Nei Gong process has somehow, improved or brought out, natural psi abilities, which will be measurable because the people who are running the psi games, there's quite a number of scientists and consultants that are going to be there. I'm sure they're going to measure a ton of the contestants. So it's not just somebody saying, yes, I can predict the future. It's no, here I am doing this task for 15 rounds, and I can say definitively above chance, I've determined the door through which this one object is going to appear. That means some kind of communication is going on. That means that, human beings have that ability to receive that communication. So I credit a little bit this Nei Gong process with helping to improve my psi abilities. And I'm willing to prove it, to actually go through the exercises myself and to prove it in front of testers in front of the world to see whether or not it actually does do that. So I'm excited about doing those kind of
That's
things. So
wonderful. Is James going to be participating in those as well?
I don't know if I don't think he's a competitor because he seemed surprised that I was actually being a competitor because we would have seen each other on the boards as the pre-testing.
Right,
But he may be going for sure. So, but
right.
it's in Virginia. It's in August. It's the first time they're going to do this, and they're going to hopefully do this every year to try to encourage people in a friendly way, to develop their psi abilities in terms of how the Nei Gong process has affected me, just to give people a glimpse at at
Mm-hmm.
where it's going. Um, and this relates to the Fa Qi. So one of the one of the consequences of doing this particular Taoist internal alchemy is Fa Qi, which is the human bioelectric external energy emission. So some of the exercises that I'm doing on a regular basis are meant to help, open up my channels and be able to emit this energy externally. I can say, definitively that by doing these exercises, I am feeling electricity flowing through my body. So at the beginning, I did not. I had other sensations, but now that it's been a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years as I've been doing it, especially through my arm and through my hands and my fingers, I'm feeling the internal pressure of the chi as it builds up in the lower dantian, and then it's actually expressing itself as little threads of electricity which go through my arms and
Mm-hmm.
slightly out my palms, and I feel pressure coming out of my fingers that are like little threads of electricity. So in July, I'm going to Malaysia for one of the trips to see some of the masters in order to get
Mm-hmm.
tested and to have my meridians kind of further opened in the other direction. So they send chi through their fingers, or they hold on to your hand and they send chi through their palms, and it goes through your arm and causes your arm to lock out. Um, what I'm hoping is that because I'm practicing a lot and I'm trying to be a good student, is that they'll see that I actually have really good open meridians, and then that hopefully I'll
Mm-hmm.
be able to attempt to then do the reverse, pull the energy for myself and push the energy out and see whether or not I'm capable of doing it in that environment. But that's one of my goals, is to be able to emit this electrical energy outside of myself to be used for healing and for other things. So after every day of doing this for a couple of years, I am feeling legitimately that electricity sparkling through my body, across my arms, out my fingers.
What a fascinating life you live,
It's
Jeff.
interesting, yeah. Well, and it's something that
Seriously.
other people could do, right? They just have to do the training, right?
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And I love the fact that, you know, the interest in all those things has started so early for you, but that, you grew up clearly in an environment where you could facilitate it and where you could follow those interests and passions, and look what it brought you. I mean, it's really, really fascinating. It's been such pleasure talking to you, Jeff.
Yeah, you as well, for sure. I'm glad we met.
Yeah, I'm really glad we met too. And I hope that I'll have you back at some point, maybe summer, autumn, so you can tell me what's unfolded after the games, and as far as the research goes and just your own direct experience. So thank you so much for being the guest. A really
Yeah.
wonderful conversation. And thanks everyone for watching. Take care.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you. Appreciate it.